Kina ki uta kia mātara ki tai. Ki hiake tātā kura, he huka he tio, he hahau, ki he mauri ora. Kaupane ai ngā kino o te wā, kaupare ai ngā poke o te wā, ki ke te ai mātou te arataka a tāne. Tāne whakapiripiri, tāne te waiora, tāne nui ārangi. Tēnā ka whakatau mai te Māori, Māori tū, Māori ore, tēnei te pau tupu ānuku, tēnei te pau tupu ārangi, waiti, waitā, tihe Māori ore. Nō reira, ko maranga ake a Matariki ki tōna pai. E tīrama ana ki te whenua, e tohu aroha, e tohu maumahara, mō rātou ko mene ki te pō. Ko maranga ake a Matariki ki tōna pai, he tauhau te tau, Matariki pūrotu, Matariki matainaina I kore. Nō reira tēnā rā tātou, nau mai, hare mai tātou katoa ki te karanga o Matariki, hare mai ki a tātou, te rau ora I mihi kauana ki a koutou, I te tini, I te mano, ngā mātau waka, ngā hapu karanga, maha I wangini a tātou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko tio so tēnei e mihi kauana ki a koutou, māku te honori hei whakariti tēnei kaupapa o tātou mo tēnei ata, kei taku nei taha tō mātou mātenga kōrero, mumu kōrero mo tēnei kaupapa, ko Maria, ko tākuta Maria Baker tēnā, ko tākuta Kiri Kiaho Lawson tēnā, anō reira nau mai. Greetings everybody, kia ora. Welcome to this, the fourth and final webinar for the Matariki series. It's appropriate that this occurs on the 14th, Miki, the first day of the Māori New Year lunar calendar, that we have this take this time to reflect about the well-being of our people, suicide prevention, suicide postvention, tino rangatiratanga, and self-determination for Māori. Really appropriate kōrero going forward. So with that, we're going to go to our panel for them to introduce themselves, and then following that, we will begin our kōrero with Dr. Keri. So maybe we start with you, Maria, in relation to or mihi.
Tēnā koe, tio ngā mihi mahana ki a koutou, nā ori hau te taitukarau ko Ngāpui me Tararoa, Maria Baker hau. It's grand to join you all this morning on this really important kaupapa. Kia ora.
Hi, Kerry.
Yeah. I'm just trying to bring up the... Okay, kapai. He mihi mahana tēnei ki a koutou katoa, kei roto I tō tātou kaupapa whakahirahira mō ngai tāua te iwi Māori, ngā whānau, ngā hapu, ngā iwi. Ko Waiau, ko Keri Lawson te aho te ingoa, no Ngāti Pāhau wera, Ngāti Kahungunu, ki Wairoa, ki Here Taunga, no Ngāti Parau, no Ngai Tūhoi, no Rongo Whakāta, me Ngai Tahua Hau, no Ngāti Pākehā I te taho tōku pāpa, no Norway, Ireland, Scotland, ahau. Ngā mihi ki a koutou katoa I tēnei rangi pai. Kia ora rā.
Here anō, taku here anō hoki, no tainui, no hauraki, kei tērā taha, ko moe hau te maunga tikapa te moana Ngāti te au te tahapu, Ngāti maru te iwi tainui te waka, mātai whitu, e marae ko te whānau a wātini tēnā. I ake nei au ki te rataha o ngā pai maunga I roto I te Wairiki, ko tū haurangi, ko Ngāti Wāhio, Ngāti Pikuo, te whānau a Bowser, te whānau a Hera, kai atu rā ki Teironga Moana, ki Ngāti Hangarau, te whānau a Paumako, ko Tio Sō, tōku nei ingoa, pēnā tātou.
Kia ora.
So last week we spoke about Māori community development and suicide prevention. This week we're going to be talking about tino rangatiratanga and self-determination. So I'm interested in both of you in terms of what might be the different or the same about that kaupapa. So ko atu te rākau ki a koe in the first instance, Kere, and if you begin with your presentation about why is tino rangatiratanga and self-determination so important for Māori well-being going forward? Pēnā koe whaia.
Kia ora. This is the This is the kaupapa for today's webinar. The difference between tino rangatiratanga and community development is that tino rangatiratanga or self-determination, which is different when we refer to tino rangatiratanga or in our own reo, it's a different, much more expansive process and whakaaro than self-determination. Self-determination is the word that we use when we're advising the government about what they need to do to stop suicide. Tino rangatiratanga is really the only strategy for Māori suicide prevention that is likely to work. Community development comes within that broad overarching kaupapa of tino rangatiratanga. Because tino rangatiratanga is sovereignty. It is our ability to act for the well-being of our whānau, our hapu, our iwi, and ngā tangata Māori katoa. Community development is a process that occurs under the broad umbrella or within the broad kaupapa, the overarching kaupapa, the kaupapa tuatahi of tino rangatiratanga. This is an image from my daughter's, my daughter is an artist, and this is an image that Huriana produced, which talks about or which refers to the love of our tūpuna for us. In Huriana's words, you are your tūpuna's greatest joy. Your existence is your tūpuna's greatest triumph. You are a living, breathing embodiment of their love. You are everything they struggled for and everything they dreamed of. You are infinite. You are cosmic. You are divine. You are worthy. You are light. You are light. You are light. In the kaupapa of suicide, this whakaaro is often lost. And it's lost in the consciousness of our whānau who make the decision to end their lives or to take matters into their own hands. One might say that they have lost their relationship or the consciousness of their relationship as being divine, or who they are as being divine creations from our tūpuna, from te ao wairua, and that the pain and the suffering and all the mamai in their physical lives and the physical realities of their daily lives have taken over in terms of subduing or subduing is probably the best word to use. Their true identity, or our true identity, as coming from our tūpuna, coming from the love of millions, coming from those who have walked this whenua before us, and from our tūpuna atua. These are some statements that came out of the recent, or the Māori suicide prevention, post-vention policy research and action or services wānanga that we held at Otago University in February this year. Everybody has a different definition of tino rangatiratanga. And so here are some of the kōrero that came out of that wānanga in the first panel, which was a leadership panel about what does tino rangatiratanga in action mean. So this is what Ezekiel Raui said. The fact that a rangatahi can stand today and speak about a kaupapa that impacts all our lives is tino rangatiratanga in action. And that's a really, really important whakaaro, that we need to work in a way that elevates the voices of our whānau. We assume when we do that, that they are knowledgeable about their own kaupapa. They are rangatira, aha ko te aha, although many of our whānau have suffered under the impacts of colonisation or under the taumaha of colonisation, they are nonetheless rangatira. Our historic stories teach us about tino rangatiratanga in action. That is the importance of our whakapapa. Whakapapa is the centre of our universe. It's everything that we are. And so the loss of connection to whakapapa is a major, major risk for suicide. However, the reclamation of everything, our knowledge, our mātauranga, our tikanga, our whakapapa knowledge, and how we're positioned in this physical world as direct descendants of tūpuna is really, really vital to our efforts to prevent suicide. That's often called a process of reconnection or reconnectedness. But I believe it is an action towards tino rangatiratanga, learning who we are, where we come from, the stories of resilience that are unfathomable when you look at the narrative of creation, the narrative of our tūpuna sailing across Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, navigating across Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, the very fact that despite all the trauma over 250 years of it and counting, we're still here. That speaks volumes about the fact that we're not in this life alone. It speaks volumes about the ongoing assertion, even though we're not always conscious of it, of our rangatiratanga. The fact that our ancestors circumnavigated one of the largest bodies of water in the world with what Europeans at the time considered to be primitive tools is tino rangatiratanga in action. Tino rangatiratanga can be seen in the establishment of Māori seats in Parliament, a first for Aotearoa and for Indigenous peoples across the world. It can be seen in the establishment of a Māori curriculum, a Māori education system that enables us to be proud of who we are. It can be seen in our rangatahi, and it is the embodiment of self-esteem, of self-confidence and pride in who we are as individuals. And the last pearl of wisdom that Ezekiel Rawi left with us is that tino rangatiratanga is the ability to be Māori in everything that we do, uncompromisingly, with unsolicited loudness about who we are, open and ready for the spaces that we're in. Lady Tireti Moxon said, "Kaya tātou te ara tika." The answers are within us, and some of us have lost our way or have lost confidence in the answers that are within us. Lady Tireti's advice was that we take the kaupapa of suicide prevention, of tino rangatiratanga, which is the overarching kaupapa, and make it ours, because unless we do that, we'll be continually answerable to a government that is detrimental in its treatment and responses to Māori. We have people making policies, regulation and decisions who believe they're our saviours, but we are our own saviours, and we need to step in to hold that kaupapa, to hold that vision, and to do our utmost in whatever sphere of influence we work within or we are in, we have, so that vision kaya tātou te ara tika can come to life. Matua Witi Ashby said this: "We've come too far not to go further. We've done too much not to do more." He talks about our Māori house as being brilliant for 1,500 to 2,000 years, until the colonisers, the British, reduced our home to a colony of Britain. And that is precisely where our problems began and where they still lay. The damage of colonisation lives with us every day and is reflected in our numbers of our whānau who are incarcerated, the numbers of our tamariki who are being uplifted by the state, numbers of homeless, te mea, te mea, te mea. It's a long litany of violation and abuse from the time of colonisation to the present day. Engari, we must always remember that we are descended from greatness, and that the wairua, our tūpuna, are always with us, that we walk in two worlds. We walk in te ao wairua, we walk in te ao kiko. So we walk in the physical and the spiritual realms every moment and every second, every microsecond, every day of our lives. Tino rangatiratanga, according to Matua Witi, is seen in actions that restore our reo, restore our tikanga and whenua to us. And those kaupapa are worth fighting for, as we see in actions such as the occupation of Ihumātao. This is another beautiful image from Huriana. And these are the words: "Another new imagining of Hine Nui Te Pō. I've spent so much of my life trying to be smaller, trying to fit into everyone else's narrow-minded view of what was beautiful, acceptable, lovable, desirable. But all that I am comes from my tūpuna, and that's beautiful, actually. I'm slowly learning to love and cherish the body I'm in. Some days it's hard, other days it comes naturally. It's a process." So when working with our rangatahi and with those of our whānau who put themselves down on a regular basis for whatever reason, because they perceive themselves to be not all that they should be, we need to remind them that they are magnificent creations. We are all magnificent creations, mai ngā tūpuna atua. And so when we get into that kōrero of self-denigration, that is a slippery slope that can lead to suicide. So we need to whakamana those amongst us who are suffering, who are down on themselves because they perceive themselves to be less than perfect, and remind them that in the eyes of our tūpuna, we are all perfect creations. Whaia tihi puanaki. Tino rangatiratanga means teaching tamariki about themselves through kapahaka and teaching them how to connect with their culture as Māori. So tino rangatiratanga is the lived embodiment of our tikanga, of our whakapapa, of our cultural values as Māori. Whaia tihi is an auntie, she's a whaia, she's a teacher, and she considers her main role to be setting tamariki Māori on the right path. So she says, I teach them to learn about themselves through kapahaka and connecting with their culture as Māori. Sometimes I find rangatahi living on the streets, and when I find them, I maintain a stable and positive presence in their lives by drawing them into kapahaka, and just by taking an interest as a whaia who cares about them. She also said sometimes as a grumpy auntie. Whaia ne wirangi kohu. Tino rangatiratanga in action is about connecting with our own experiences, our own stories, interpreting and understanding what they mean, because within the understanding of our own stories and the connection with our own stories, we become rangatira of our own kaupapa. So Whaia suggested that tino rangatiratanga needs to be viewed through a bicultural lens. She positions herself as a tohunga, as a healer, through opening doors to the souls of the healers within. And her reference to this is a statement of confidence in rangatahi to know best about healing themselves. But sometimes the reality is they do need our support to do that. This is another artwork from Huriana. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, it becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid. And that came from the wonderful scholar Audre Lorde, who's since passed away, who developed the whakaaro around the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And what that means in terms of Aotearoa is that we cannot look to a Pākehā government to free us from the oppression of colonisation, of which that government is both an outcome and a facilitator. This is Huriana's kōrero about the artwork I just showed you. As we reflect on many things during Matariki, acknowledging those that have passed and looking forward to the future and the new world, daring to create a new vision for our communities, both locally and globally, is critical. Sometimes the work ahead of us can be scary and overwhelming, but when we discover the power of our collective voices, when we begin to believe in our vision for a world in which all of us are free, when we work to build our movements rooted in hope and a deep love for our communities, we will be unstoppable. That is a statement of Tino Rangatiratanga in action. We talk about, we've been doing some work on a model of practice called Mahere Whenua. When I say we, I mean our team at Te Rauora. So Mahere Whenua refers to the lay of the land. In order to navigate our way through life with all its challenges and ups and downs and mamai and joy and everything that is part of our lived expression of who we are as tamariki mai ngā atua, mai ngā tūpuna. We need to consider the issues and the challenges before us, but also never lose hope that healing and self-determination as a response to colonization can free us from the mamai of colonization. So this is Te Ao Pākehā, ongoing colonization, illustrated by Huriana Kōpeke Te Aho, in which she refers to, or they refer to, historical trauma or soul wounding. This is the unseen kehua, monster, whatever we call it, it refers to the unseen impacts, wairua, of Pākehā colonisation. So my question to you all is this: what is your vision for tino rangatiratanga, for self-determination in 2020 and beyond? My kuia used to say to me that dreams are really important. Having visions are really, really important. So her advice to me was to keep dreams alive, to keep dreaming, to keep thinking about a better future, to keep thinking about, to keep remembering who I am and who we are. And she said to me, if we don't dream, we die. I don't believe that we've lost the capacity to dream. I believe that the dreams are still in all of us, but the pressures of life sometimes distance us from remembering who we are and remembering what our dreams are. So kaua e wari wari, te kaha o tātou moi moi a. Te ao Māori in pre-colonisation, according to the vision of Huriana, looks like this. These values are still accessible to us. Some of us need help to relearn what they actually look like and how they manifest in our everyday lives. But the great thing is that they are still here. We still have access to whakapapa knowledge, to knowledge of tikanga, of te ao wairua, of tapu, noa, mana and Māori. There are other pre-colonised or values, Māori values that come out of a pre-colonised reality. And so learning and reaching into the depth of these values, of these kaupapa that direct our lives and have the potential to transform our lives when we walk and live and practice them every day. They're still available to us. Ahakoa, we've been through the fires of colonization. This mātauranga, this wisdom, mai ngā tua, mai ngā tūpuna, is still with us and still accessible to us. So here are some, I can't remember if these are concluding remarks. I think they probably are. Yes, they are. We need to re-establish a vision for tino rangatiratanga, to work in hope and to reclaim hope for those who can't see hope, of our whānau who can't see hope in their own lives, to stand in the space for them, alongside of them, embrace them, work with them in only a hopeful way, and over time to bring them to a place where they are able to reclaim hope. Storying the deeds of our tūpuna. This is an incredible resource that we have for suicide prevention and postvention. When we look at and unpack the stories of our tūpuna, how they survived, the visions that they had for us, their mokopuna, those stories need to be told. They need to be reclaimed. They need to be shared with our whānau, with our hapu, with our iwi, with our Māori communities, with our whānau who may be disconnected and lost, because in them is profound wisdom and expansive hope. They teach us about life. They teach us about overcoming challenges and triumphs in our lives. Re-establishing a common vision for mana motuhake. The mahi that I did with the tūhoi during the tūhoi treaty settlement process was to develop a blueprint or a vision, a whakaaro for a new generation iwi authority for tūhoi. So local level political it's not control. It is really a process of elevating mana at a local level, and for those of us who whakapapa to the various hapu of tūhoi or the various hapu of Ngāti Kahungunu or Ngāti Porou, etc. Our first and foremost passion should be the reclaiming of mana in our local rohi. Mana motuhake is local authority, not the Pākehā version of local authorities. And tino rangatiratanga is the bringing together of mana motuhake for a greater purpose, for a collective vision, and that is the realization of tino rangatiratanga. To re-establish a vision for whānau ora. Not necessarily the government-funded whānau ora program, but the well-being of those closest to us, our own whānau. To free ourselves from the chains that bind us. And I take inspiration on a regular basis from those who have lived in situations or have been exposed to experiences of being incarcerated, having their freedoms limited, being monitored by the police and other agents of the state. So freeing ourselves from the chains that bind us, according to many international prisoners, Indigenous people who have been incarcerated for their beliefs, is that the first thing we need to do is to free our wairua and free our minds from the chains that are imposed upon us. Remember who we are and where we come from. Remember who you are and where you come from. Teach our mokopuna. Teach our tamariki. This is who you are. This is where you come from. You come from the love of millions. You come from the character of Maui. You come from the character of Kahungunu. And this was Kahungunu's character. You come from the character of Rongo Mai Wahine. And these were the feats of mana that she initiated and carried through in her life. Take back the wonderment of us. We are really phenomenal. We are incredible. We are whakapapa. We are rangatira. We descend from rangatira. We descend from atua. Take back the belief in us and the power and the mana of us. The kaha of us, the dreams, the moimoia of us. So what can we reclaim in 2020 from our stories, from our histories, her stories, their stories? I'm trying to be politically correct here. In 2020 and beyond. How do we position ourselves? What visions do we have for ourselves, for the contribution that we can make? Because we all have the power to make a contribution towards self-determination, towards reclaiming tino rangatiratanga in our own lives. Ahakoa he iti, ahakoa he nui. In small ways, in big ways, it all counts and it all matters. So some of us are activists, writers. The very act of survival can be understood as an act of resistance. Some of us are dreamers. Some of us are risk takers. Some of us are actors and enablers. But we are all through whakapapa. Aroha mai, we are all through whakapapa, rangatira in our own right. So how do we manifest tino rangatiratanga in 2020 and beyond? This is another artwork from Huriana that Huriana developed specifically for the basement theatre, Matariki season. Matariki huarahi ki te oranga tangata. Matariki is an important time for us, a time to acknowledge and honour those who are no longer here in the physical world, but ever present in te ao wairua. A time for rebirth and renewal, a time of shifting and changing the ways in which we navigate this world. And this is a final kaupapa that I want to share with you. This is a poem that I've written. It's called Walk in Your Rangatiratanga. Walk in your rangatiratanga every moment of your life, of our lives. Remember, we are magnificent creations. Mai ngā atua, mai ngā tūpuna. Remember, we come from the aroha of generations, without limits, transcending time and space. Remember, we are meant to be here. They have a purpose for our lives. Keep our moimoia alive and hold fast to them. Never apologize for being Māori. Never hang your head when someone swears at you in a public place for proudly wearing your pūkauai. Never let anyone tell you that you are not enough. Dream, love, live, share the lessons of our tūpuna. Own our stories, own your stories. Own our rights to share our stories. Own our search for solutions. Ask, what did our tūpuna do in times of trauma? And there was so much trauma, but there was also triumph. And life beyond the colonizers' attempt to destroy. Walk forever and always in your rangatira. This is an image from Huriana. E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi engari he toa takitsini. My strength is not mine alone. It is the result of the strength of many. Okay, he pātai.
Tēnā koe whae, me tō kōrero, kuku nui tā aroha, he nui tā whakaro I roto I tō kōrero. Thank you for your kōrero whae and your sharing. Tino rangatiratanga in action. You started your kōrero in terms of sharing some of the kōrero and sharing from the symposium that you hosted with the Wellington whānau earlier in the year. The karo of some of our rangatahi, tau mātua kuia, mātanga I roto I tēnei momo mahi. The importance of being heard is one of the things I hear. And having voice, strong voice, being Māori, being you. One of the other things I took from there was around the theme around the saying of whakaatua koe, ia koe anō. The solutions, the answers are within us all. Love is important. You shared your mahere whenua model and about a vision. Interesting kōrero, a vision in 2020. So a vision is about the now, not just in the future, but now. The challenges, covert and overt. I roto I tēnei ao huri o tātou, tā ao pāhia. And the need for vision and drawing from our puna mātauronga, our whakapapa and our journeys as a people. He pātai tēnei from one of our whānau online, tēnā koe Darren Yates. Pātai tāna, can we achieve tino rangatiratanga without a direct connection to our whenua, i.e. urban-based whānau? What can we achieve, or how do we achieve tino rangatiratanga while living in dense urban areas within a current neoliberal and economic environment? Maria, do you want the opportunity to come in and talk to that pātai, or?
Well, let Kitty respond first, I guess, just in terms of the respect of the beautiful kōrero that she's laid down for this morning. What are your thoughts, Kitty?
I believe that although the whenua has been taken by the Crown, has been alienated, we still need to view it as ours. Still need to live as if it is ours. And while some of us are living away from our whenua, our papakainga, it is still there, and it is still available for us to go and stand on the whenua, even if ahakoa it's now got a housing development sitting on top of it. The whenua underneath that housing development is still ours. it's still one way that we can connect, that we can exercise our rangatiratanga by going and visiting those sacred places where our tūpuna lived and loved and walked and set a plan in action for us, their mokopuna. So part of it is about reframing your relationship to the whenua, aha ko te aha. Regardless of where you're currently living, many of our whānau are, I guess you could say, trapped in urban contexts on low wages, working to survive and keep the kai on the table and the wolves away from the door. Engari, we live in a wairua reality as well. And so teaching, for example, I teach my mokopuna about who they are, where they're from. I show them photographs of the whenua, both that is still in our hapu control, but that has also been taken from us. So I show them the photos or the images of the community of Akaroa and say, moko, once upon a time, this whenua, this land that is yours, that is nannies, that is papas, whenua, aunties, whenua, that was covered in tall trees. And those tall trees were what built the city of Ōtautahi, or as the Pākehā call it, Christchurch. So we keep our stories alive. That is something we have control and power over, regardless of where we're living. And I think about Nelson Mandela's kōrero, about when he was locked or incarcerated on Robben Island, when he said they could do things to my tinana, but they could never take away my memories and take away my power and my belief in us. So, yeah, so I hope I've answered your question, but if not, can you, ask another question? When I was working with my iwi with Ngai Tūhui, one of the issues was that those of our tūhui whānau who were living away from our rohe, who were living away from our whenua, from our whakapapa, were looking out the window every morning and seeing another's mo, another's awa, another's moana that wasn't theirs, but for the time being they were manuhiri in someone else's rohe. But that didn't ever take away the fact that the door to coming home was always open, and that there were different ways of reconnecting with their whakapapa and being embraced within the iwi of tūhui. And that was through things like wānanga, online wānanga, development wānanga happening in South Auckland and other communities, Te Whanganui Ātara, where our tūhui whānau are living for mahi, and where some of them have been living for generations. But the iwi settlement, the treaty settlement process has offered us a way back, and a way to reconnect, and a way to claim our whakapapa and claim our belonging. So, yeah, ko tēnei taku whakaaro.
Got another question here from what about the establishment of autonomous Māori health authority? How do we do this? Concepts of our kōrero to them.
How do we establish a Māori Health Authority? Is that the question? How do we go about that?
an autonomous Māori health authority? How do we do this?
It isn't as if we haven't done it before, actually. If you look back in our history, I mean, look, the whole whakaaro around tino rangatiratanga is about a greater autonomy and our increased control. It is, and it's been the aspiration of all Indigenous peoples the world over, you know, including ourselves. I think if we contextualising things, this is about taking control of the resources and activities that impact us as Māori, and doing it in a way that strengthens our personal and collective well-being. So we've just heard from Whaiakere, you know, many kōrero about, you know, the right of Māori to exercise authority and the control of resources, those that we own and are supposed to own. And if we're to look at a Māori health authority in terms of the tino rangatiratanga kind of space in determining and taking the control, it is also about how we determine the interaction with the Crown accordingly, so that we can actually meet our own needs and our aspirations. But, you know, in quite practical ways, over many years, you know, it has meant actually for our people to be able to design, implement and manage our own kaupapa. And in this regard, the Māori Health Authority. So, you know, it is about the decision making and the ability to do it. I think part of it too is that we have to have faith in ourselves. We've actually got a really good track record of Māori providers and kaimahi and many communities that can do this really well, actually. But it does need to be in under our terms. I think part of it around tino rangatiratanga is definitely mana mutahake, autonomy and control, all those things. So if we apply that in the suicide prevention space, then it involves what Whaia's been talking about over the last few weeks about being involved with policy formulation, about planning, decision making, about being part of the procurement processes, about budget holding, about managing that budget and the resources, and all that sort of thing. So, you know, if you think about that, if we have a Māori Health Authority, an independent Māori Health Authority, which actually we're almost there if you look at some of our infrastructure, you're going to see massive impacts. You're going to see stronger communities. You're going to see whānau ora, the broader whānau ora that Whaia's talked about. You're going to see development. You're going to see Māori purchase and provider networks. You're going to see massive advances in our situation around our contemporary stresses, the socioeconomic issues. You're going to find meaningful employment. You're going to find better income and access to education. There will be the elimination of disparities and access to te ao Māori and those sorts of things. So we need it. You know, the structures at the minute are hugely polluted by institutional racism. You know, sure, there's a few of us now over the last 10 to 20 years that have got to a position of having qualifications and all the rest of it, but it's hard work. You know, we're still within a system that is oppressive. You know, we still have issues around cultural appropriation. We're giving groups the Māori name apparently supposed to be responsible. Well, no, it isn't, darling. You know, so when we look at tino rangatiratanga, it has been something that our generations of whānau hapu iwi have fought for and continue to fight for going forward, and especially in regards to health and well-being. If we think about both individual and collective well-being, that is the kaupapa around how we determine the solutions and strategies around this kaupapa, but more broadly about our well-being as a people now and going forward. That is very much what we've been about, thinking about our whānau, our mokopuna, our tamariki in the future going forward. And I don't think that whawhai or that journey or that commitment will change any. It'll look different in different places, but it'll continue. That's the hikoi that we've needed to take into account in regards to our well-being. So tino rangatiratanga in whatever ways is very much about us having greater control and greater autonomy.
And it starts with us. It starts here. It starts here in the context of our own homes. It starts in our spheres of influence that we all have. And if we were to collect those spheres of influence that we're all walking and working in and trying to use or extract, you know, wring out everything that's of value within those places where we work, within our spheres of influence for the greater vision of tino rangatiratanga, then we have come a long way, but there is a long way yet to go. And so as someone who's fast approaching 60 years of age, 70 if we compare the life expectancy between Māori and Pākehā women, we age at a rate of 8 to 10 years ahead of Pākehā women. Then our legacy and our obligation is to pass on the struggle, is to pass on the lessons from the triumphs that we've had, is to pass on what would my tūpuna do in this situation. And so I can say with my own children that that's what I've been working on, is a personal whānau project of decolonising them, getting them involved in protest and resistance actions, getting them to use the skills and the gifts that they have on their lives for the kaupapa. And above all, for my son, who's the father of soon to be my fourth mokopuna, to help him to support my mokos, to understand who they are, where they come from, and the things that are uniquely theirs as whakapapa, as Māori mokopuna. Because we have to pass the baton. So that's part of the strategy for self-determination, for tino rangatiratanga, is to pass the baton on to those generations that follow. And I look at the achievements of Huriana in the space of political activism through art. And it's a very, very powerful influence that they've been able to have in Aotearoa and in Indigenous communities around the world who ask Huriana to illustrate their kaupapa for them. So, yeah, work our spheres of influence for all they're worth. Don't put all our eggs in one basket. Don't believe that the government is anything other than an agent of colonisation. You know, I've been 30 years in Public Health Commission, Māori Health Development Commission, Department of Health, then Ministry of Health, te mea, te mea, te mea. But I know and I believe and I see the fruits of this whakaaro, that the revolution begins at home by decolonising those closest to us, including our colleagues, our workmates, our people who have spheres of influence of their own. So, kia ora.
Kia ora, Kitty. You're on mute, Teal.
Mute. That's always good to do, isn't it? Any final conclusion from you there, Maria? Our time's now up. So I want to thank everybody for coming on and listening to this, our last audio little within wānanga mo te Matariki. Anaki tēnei o tātou whai atu te rauora, te kati tērā, te aukati tērā ngāngara, te mate whakamōmori, papauri i wangine tātou. O reira, hiki tia te rongo mawhiti o tēnei wānanga. Tukua kia ia, tukua kia oi. O rangi nui ki runga ko papatua nuku i waho, au me hui e. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora koutou.